It's a new way to play Dragapult. That's right, we've got Dragapult with Flapple. Welcome back everyone to more from the Sableyes. I'm Mitch and today we're going to take a look, as I said in the pre-roll, at a new deck list featuring Dragapult VMAX. This card is by far the most powerful Pokemon that has come out of the Rebel Clash set. It's been all over the place in the competitive format, and we've got a new way that you could play it. We're going to pair it up with Flapple for some extra damage counters. So we'll take a look at the list in just a second. If you haven't already subscribed, then please consider doing so. Only about 30% of people who watch our videos are subscribed, so we'd really appreciate it if you click that button, maybe even leave us a like. It's free, only takes a second, and you can always unsubscribe if you'd like. Doesn't make a massive difference to me, really. Anyway, we'll carry on with the video with the list. Now, Dragapult VMAX we've seen before. This card is everywhere. Max Phantom, 130 damage into the active position is nothing to sneeze at for 2 Psychic, and we also get to place 5 damage counters anywhere we like on the field, so that's really, really strong. And we have a couple of Pokemon that we can use to try and help us set up damage counters. We've got Zigzagoon, which has seen a lot of play. We've got Giratina with Distortion Door, and we also have a 4-3 line of Flapple, which came out in the same set, Rebel Clash. Apple Drop, if we have this card in play, we can put 2 damage counters on one of our opponent's Pokemon. If we placed damage counters in this way, we can shuffle the 2 cards into our deck, the Applin and the Flapple, and we can search them back out again a bit later on. So we've gone all in on ways on placing damage counters. There is almost no way that our opponent is going to be able to hide Pokemon on the bench. Things like Jirachi, which we play 4 of, that only have 70 HP. We're going to be able to get them pretty comfortably. We've got those Flapples as well as the Zigzagoons and the Giratina. We've also actually given ourselves a good way to use Jet Assault as well. 60 plus 80, so 140 damage for 2 Psychic Energy. We can actually put a Flapple into the active and then use Apple Drop to move our Dragapult V into the active and attack with Jet Assault. So just a neat little combo that we ought to be aware of. I don't know if this deck is as good as, it probably isn't as good as, a regular Dragapult VMAX list, but because of the power of the attack, you are going to be able to win games, and especially against decks that like to set up Pokemon on the bench, you will find yourself able to get those extra knockouts where a traditional Dragapult VMAX list won't be able to. When it comes to the rest of the list, it is very generic. We mentioned Scoop Up Net already. We have Switch as well, so that we can move our Pokemon in and out of the active, as well as a single Escape Board. We might be able to attach that to a Jirachi, or even our Dragapult and Dragapult VMAX. They have one retreat as well. When it comes to Pokemon Search, there's actually quite a lot in this list. 4 Quick Balls, like a usual deck. We also have 4 Pokemon Communication, because we are looking for a ton of extra Pokemon, and we also have Turffield Stadium as a 3 count, so we can search out our Flapples. That means that as long as we've got a Flapple in our deck, our Pokemon Communication is always live if we have Turffield Stadium in play. So that's the reason we've gone for Pokecom over something like Evo Incense, which could potentially be better, but I think that this is going to work nicely. Since we don't have all of those extra Psychic Pokemon that a traditional Dragapult VMAX list plays, we probably don't need to have the Mysterious Treasure. Pokecom will do the job anyway. Our final item card that we haven't talked about, we've got 1 copy of Reset Stamp. Nothing too crazy. We just need some way to reduce our opponent's hand size if they do take knockouts. Since we aren't playing Marnie, we've got 4 copies of Cynthia instead, as well as 4 Professor's Research, and 2 copies of Boss's Orders to gust up potential knockouts. We're not going to need it as much as we would for a traditional Dragapult list, because we do have that extra damage output, but it is always good to have access to. Now, we also have the same energy count that you would see in a traditional Dragapult VMAX list, specifically the 4 copies of the Horror Psychic Energy, which are super, super good, and now that they've fixed the bug with metal goggles, they get that much better on PTCGO. Now it's going to be doing its effect every single time, so if your opponent attacks into you, they're going to take 20 damage. We have 5 Psychic as well, just to round out our energy line. So there you go, Dragapult VMAX with Flapple. I actually really like this concept. It's one that we've been toying around with for a bit, and we'll take it out onto the ladder for you now and see how we go. Alrighty, here we go. I've actually managed to get a couple of wins with this one in our practice. We'll see whether or not we can get there. We've got the coin flip, so we will go first. It is important that we go first with this kind of deck because we do have 2 stage 1s that we want to get into play. No basic Pokemon here. That would have been a really good hand if that Dragapult VMAX had just been a Dragapult V. I would have been really happy with that. Alas, it was not to be, and instead we're actually being given a better hand. So that's fine. We've got a Jirachi. We've got all these other Pokemon we can play down. We've got a Quick Ball and a Giratina as well. So that's pretty solid. Now, again, with Dragapult lists, the most important thing is that you get your attachment down early, and we're going to be able to do that. We can Quick Ball away the Giratina here, grab ourselves an Applin, which we're going to need later, and we can just play pretty much all of these cards down. We've got the Psychic Energy here we can attach. We don't need to play down the Dragapult just yet, because we could potentially find Pokemon Communication. I want to take this Turffield, but Pokecom does seem better, because we can Pokecom this Dragapult away next turn if we need to. I think at the moment it's best to just hold onto this hand and pass. If our opponent Marnies, it's fine, we'll get new cards. If they don't, then we've got access to a Dedenne. If we can't find a supporter, we can switch. We've got everything that we need, so it's looking pretty good. I don't want to get rid of my switches though, because our opponent has a Mareep in the active, and that suggests to me that they are probably playing some sort of fluffy pillow stall, which I'm not a massive fan of, to be brutally honest. So we'll see what they are eventually going to be doing. It looks like it is stall. They've got Bellelba and Bryson Man, so we are in for a bit of a game, although I will say that this deck does have a really, really strong matchup against stall, especially with Mareep, because we can knock them out really, really easily. Only 2 Flapples is going to be enough to get that knockout. So as long as we don't get absolutely destroyed by Bellelba, that we just lost lots of bad resources. There was a research, a Flapple, and a Turffield there. I was going to say, as long as we don't waste too many resources, we should be fine, but it looks like we're actually going to be okay here anyway. We can Pokecom away this Dragapult because we top deck the Quick Ball. We can grab ourselves a Dragapult VMAX. We've got the Switch here, which is good. We Stellar Wish first. Hopefully we find something good. That Turffield is really strong. Not going to grab the supporter because we're about to Dedenne. We can switch into the active after finding ourselves a Flapple. And then all we need is an energy and we'll be attacking, which is really, really good for us. We'll take a knockout and we'll also put some damage counters onto that Zacian. So all we need is an energy and we've managed to find one. Beautiful news. We can Pokecom away, maybe this Jirachi to find another Applin, which we are going to need to set up another Flapple next turn. I don't think we really need to use the Flapple right now, though. We can just use our attack, deal some damage, take a prize. It's a good place to be in. And more importantly, we have a switch out for next turn, because we will need to switch that Dragapult out of the active if our opponent does have another Mareep, which it looks like they do. So this is going to be very interesting. Obviously, we are going to be in a pretty strong spot because of Flapple. So if our opponent does overbench, we are going to be able to place lots of damage counters down, which will be great. And this Zacian V might actually be able to be knocked out pretty quickly in relative terms, because we can place lots of damage counters down next turn. We can potentially do 180 damage. Now, that's not quite enough for a knockout. I don't think 50 plus 180 is too... No, 230. Yeah, we'd be able to take a knockout if they hadn't retreated then. Oh well, doesn't matter. They've retreated now, so we're going to have to take a knockout on this Mareep instead. The Slumbering Forest is coming down, so we're going to need to flip double heads. Doesn't matter, we've got the switch anyway. They're going to fluffy pillow us, and then unless we get very, very lucky, we are going to need to use our switch next turn. So they're using Intrepid Sword. We'll see what happens here. Heads and heads. Look at that. So we get to have our turn unimpeded. We've got the Horror Energy here. I think if we put that... Oh, actually, that was probably a big mistake. We didn't need to do that. I mean, we can take the Flapples off of the field. if we want to, but there's no real reason to do that just yet. We'll just take our knockout and then put some more damage onto this Zacian, because that's pretty much all we need to do. We found another switch, which is good. Now we'll be able to switch into Flapple next turn if we are in a bit of a pinch, and that will allow us to attack again. But this Zacian on the bench is going to survive. Lance Prism, what could this possibly be all about? Oh, 2 Dragonites. Okay, so Lance Prism lets you search the deck for 2 Dragon Pokemon after you've had something knocked out, and it looks like they're going to be using these Dragonites with Fast Call to find supporters. So they're going to grab their supporters out of their deck and be able to play pretty much anything they want to now. That's really good, and Dragonite has 160 HP, so they're not going to be very convenient to knock out with our Flapple. It looks like they're going for a second Mareep here. Probably not going to put it down. It seems unwise. Oh, in saying that, there it goes. They've put it down, and they're going to use Fluffy Pillow and put us to sleep. So now I'd think they're probably going to go for a bit of milling. Probably going to grab Bellelba Bryson Man off of this Dragonite. They're going for Lieutenant Surge, so maybe they've already got it in hand. It's fair enough. They do have a relatively large hand. You've got to think, though, that they'd be looking to remove 6 cards from our deck, and that's going to be very frustrating, although we do have access to 2 Switch already, so I'm not upset about that at all. And like I mentioned in the deck profile section, we can just switch into Flapple and then get rid of that Pokemon from the active anyway. So I think we're looking pretty solid. We did stay asleep this time, but I think I'm going to go for the Jirachi here. I would like to replace this stadium if I can, although probably not the greatest move in the world. Probably shouldn't have done that, to be honest. Anyway, we'll Stellar Wish and see what we can do. None of those cards really doing it for me here. I guess the Pokecom, we could grab that. Maybe we scoop up the Jirachi, and we could use Pokecom to find another Flapple, possibly. What we'll do is we'll Apple Drop first and put that 20 damage down onto that Zacian. That way there's guaranteed to be a Flapple in the deck. Then we'll scoop up the Jirachi, and then we'll be able to find ourselves that what do you call it? That Flapple. First, I'll discard one of the Jirachi. We'll just thin it out a little bit. We don't want to be drawing into cards that we don't want or need. Then, actually, what if I grab an Applin here and then just Cynthia? I mean, we'll lose the switch, but that's okay. Looks like, oh, we've got a lot of good stuff here. We've got the Flapple, which is great. We could potentially put down the Applin, or maybe even just hold on to it and use it with Pokecom next turn. And we have the Escape Board, which means that our Dragapult VMAX will be able to retreat even if we stay asleep next turn. So I'm relatively happy with that. I think all we need to do here, we could use Giratina to Distortion Door and put some damage onto the Zacian and the Mareep. We're about to take 1 prize, 2 prizes on the Mareep. Then we're going to put this Zacian on 140 damage. Just trying to do the maths here in my head. Maybe, is it worth keeping this Mareep alive? No, we probably should have taken the knockout on that Mareep, to be honest. But that's okay. Now we are... Oh, Turffield Stadium. Okay, cool. Now we're in a position where no matter what our opponent promotes, no matter what they do, we are going to be able to take a knockout. What I should have done is actually left that Mareep on 30 HP, because then I could have knocked it out with the Flapple. So a little bit of a misplay there, but it's okay. We've got access to pretty much everything we need, and if our opponent does put this Pokédoll in the active, then we'll actually be in an even better spot. Looks like they're going to Fluffy Pillow us and then retreat, so if they do that, that's fine. We could actually get ourselves a knockout on both the Mareep and the Zacian V here, because 150 plus 20 is 170, plus another 20 is 190. That's 30 away, and that's going to be well within our range of those damage counters. So I'm actually pretty confident that we go on to win this game, unless they reset Stamp us. I'm not sure if anything that I just said made sense. I'm kind of rambling around in my head here, trying to do the maths on the fly. I think we're actually going to be able to win. I think the 50 damage counters that we'll be able to put in play because of Max Phantom will be enough with the 2 Flapples, and I think that's probably a really good advertisement for Flapple and its merits in this list. So they are going into the Pokédoll. We'll see an Intrepid Sword here, you'd think. They'll draw a ton more cards, but they're not going to have another turn. We're going to be able to take 3 prizes this turn. We've got Escape Board in hand. What we'll do is we will retreat into the Flapple. We can make sure that that Flapple goes into the deck before we use Pokemon Communication. So we'll retreat, we'll activate Apple Drop, we'll put 20 damage onto the Zacian, we'll move the Dragapult V into the active, the VMAX, sorry. Then we'll use our Pokemon Communication to find another Flapple, and that will get us within range. We are absolutely set here. We beat Stall, we didn't even have to worry about it. Oh, come on, mate. Let me click the button, please. Just let me Apple Drop. So yet another way to play Dragapult VMAX. I actually think that this one is the most fun. I think it's one of the less consistent versions of this deck, but I really, really like the Flapples, and I think that there's a lot of potential for them, especially since we were able to take knockouts on things that normally you'd have to gust up. Like, normally you'd have to knock out a Zacian by gusting it. With Flapple, you can potentially get to those big knockouts really, really quickly. So, I think there's potential here. Definitely one that we should be looking at in the future. Anyway, without further ado, we'll end it there. Thanks very much for coming along. We appreciate your company. If you would like to subscribe, then click the button that's just here to do that. Over here, we've got some videos that YouTube thinks you'll like. And in the bottom right-hand corner, as usual, we have our playlist for more Rebel Clash content. Thank you, everyone, and hopefully you've enjoyed this one. We'll see you again next time for more from the Sableyes. Bye.